Welcome to Lift Your Legacy. My name is Jacob Prupp, father, husband, and rabbi. And each week we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unlock your inner potential and create change that will impact the future. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it.
We are thrilled to have on today Noiky, the legendary rabbi from Gibraltar, who is a internationally renowned rabbi and inspirational speaker to very large and important people, and also a beautiful singer. My goodness, what a pleasure to hear you. So thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here today. Really it is. Thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you. Thank you, rabbis. What a pleasure. Two incredibly close friends of mine. I'm so glad that we're able to meet each other, so much kindred souls. And I'm really excited to have Rabbi Noiky on this conversation. I think one of the thrusts and the reasons we've got Rabbi Noiky on this conversation is over the course of the years, he's met many incredibly successful Jewish leaders and CEOs of varying degrees of identity and observance of the Jewish religion and the Jewish culture, and even identity with the Holy Land of the State of Israel. And without exception, many of whom I've introduced to Rabbi Noiky, including many non-Jewish people who are extremely established, they've all walked away infused with a new love and sense of joy and identity and strength and desire to reacquaint themselves with the essence of Judaism and the Holy Land. And what I'd love Rabbi Noiky to talk about is, one, how does he do that? How does he feel when he's doing that? And some inspirational takeaways of that process.
So thank you, Mike, for that glowing introduction. And the truth is, you're not really going to be happy with my answer. I don't really know if there's a one-size-fits-all success formula, that works with people. I really feel that when you have an opportunity to be with people, I think enthusiasm is infectious. I think that's point number one. I think you have to really want to be together with somebody else when you're with them. And certainly as a Jewish person, I really believe that when God puts another person in front of me, there's something that these two souls can accomplish in this world. And it's more than just, what can I get out of this? Or there's something a little bit deeper. There's two things going on concurrently. There's stuff, the body, and then there's the soul. There's two bodies sitting here, but there's also two souls. And I think if we can tap into understanding that what you bring to the world is unique, but what you can achieve by truly being invested with what someone else is saying or doing or being, I think that brings a fusion and it takes it to another level. And I think this would probably better be enhanced with a study from Harvard, which started in 1938. Harvard took two groups of people. If I'm not mistaken, there were 700 or so men, right? Some of them were sophomores in Harvard, and the others were young children who were growing up in abject poverty. We're talking about 1938 Boston, largely didn't have flowing water, like running water in their houses. And you would think that the people who are going to go on to much greater success in life are those guys who have already started on a decent footing, and they're going to go on to be wealthy and successful. And what they wanted to do was try and economize, try and understand, get a handle and a grip on who's going to be more successful in the long run, who's going to be more happy, who's going to be healthier, who's going to live longer. And what they wanted to do was accumulate data and see what they were going to do with that data. And you know what? Most times these studies kick off, they usually die within a few years. A, because they run out of money, or B, the director runs out of steam, or the data's not stacking up, or the occupants, or the participants, I should say, they kind of drop out. What's stunning is that this study's still going. It's unbelievable. It's still going. And you see an incredible thing. It's a larger study, and I don't want to go into it too deeply. But basically, they watched people grow. And this wasn't just a random questionnaire of, how you're doing. This was coming into these people's homes. This was taking their full medical records. This was taking blood workups. This was taking full interviews from family members. And, they watched people develop alcoholism and schizophrenia. And they watched one of their subjects become president of the United States. They watched some people climb from the very bottom rung of the ladder of what we might call opportunity, and go all the way to the top, and others make the journey in the other direction. And the staggering 75-year data, and more, was, after all is said and done, who lives longest, who lives most happy, who lives most focused? It's an incredible thing. It's not the wealthier person. It's not the healthiest person. And you want to know something? When they looked at octogenarians and they said, what could we pick out in these guys in their 50s that will tell us where they'll be in their 80s? The incredible thing is, those people whose relationships were most meaningful absolutely lasted the longest. And the data that they've accumulated over so many years and thousands of now participants, now there's over 2,000 people involved in this study, because now they've included their wives and their children and now their grandchildren. And it's an incredible pattern. It's an incredible thing. The more somebody feels like, I'm together here, being needed, being appreciated, I'm achieving something by being deeply together with someone else, meaningful relationships, these people last and live the longest.
Okay, that was a question I was about to ask you. You said, I was on mute, my apologies. You said relationships. That's an extremely broad term. So in today's world, people aren't even able to define what is a meaningful relationship, because there's so much, first of all, you don't have physical presence because of Corona. Secondly, you have tons of social media. In the good old days, my days before your time, we had a pen pal. We used to write a letter. The amount of time you put into writing that letter could have taken you a whole day. So you really imbued meaning to that letter. Now people text and email and they spend a minute to encompass the same degree of communication. So what to you is a meaningful relationship, both with oneself and with others?
Right. So the truth is, I'm going to cheat here for a minute. I'm going to cheat. And what I'll tell you is, I think every single person really should be focusing on three kinds of relationships. I think there's always that critical relationship that we have with others, which you highlighted there, Mike, as a bit of a fluffy area in today's world, where somebody says, you know, they text their friend and they say, wow, weather's crazy, lols, and they think that's somehow communication and that's something that's really happened. And with a little bit of, I guess, my clinical training as a therapist, and having understood that people in a meaningful and a present relationship can achieve so much, I think youngsters today are being cheated by thinking that somehow just a little thumbs up, a little blue thumbs up is somehow connection, and it isn't. And it's a sad adulteration of what relationships may be. But there's the power of the relationship with other people. There's a relationship that you have to have with yourself. And I think that's also very, very clouded. And the third relationship is a spiritual one, you and God. And I think all of these three need addressing. I think they really do. And I think the one thing that paints them all, the one brush that paints them all, is time. Quality, exclusive time dedicated to building those things. And I think it touches on your point now, Mike, that in a technologically advanced world, we feel that somehow we'll make relationships by social media, and I think perhaps the reverse is true. You know, if a couple both sit at a table and text each other, we'd see the height of irony about that. And there's been plenty of cartoons of couples next to each other, you know, texting. But the sad truth is, that's kind of the reality today. How many families do the most basic...
I'm going to interrupt you just to keep focused on my question, because you said meaningful relationship.
I'm getting to that.
What are the qualities of a meaningful relationship? Give me bullet points.
Well, I guess the simplest bullet point would be, when I'm here right now, how much of me is here and how much of me is there? And I'll give you a good example.
In the moment.
Absolutely. And being confidently there as well. And it does take an element of self-esteem and self-assurance and self-confidence to be here right now. I'll give you a great example. As I speak to you right now, if even 1% of me or 2% of me is thinking, is this coming across okay? My answer isn't as full. I'm not as present. I'm not there. Or there's a bit of me away. And so many people, because we multitask so much today, we've got so many things on the fly, there's WhatsApps going, we know we've got to answer that email, we know there's other stuff going on. How much of that filters into the moment that we're sitting in front of someone else? I would say quite a lot. And the word I'm going to use is mindfulness. I really believe that people have to be mindful, which means when I'm here with you, I have to really concentrate on that and say, I'm here with you. And in that sense, you know, if a husband and a wife really feel, I'm here in this moment for you, what can I bring? What can I give? It's almost a negation of self. It's such a heightened spiritual awareness moment. It's unbelievable.
So I think what we're hearing is the idea that it's very important to set an intention before you go into an interaction in order to know sort of what I'm trying to do. What's fascinating is there was a great cartoon, or not cartoon, I think it was a meme, where it was showing like somebody looking at Zoom, like looking at the meeting, but then like what they're actually looking at was just a picture of themselves. And I think that that's also something that's so difficult, is we're so wrapped up in the image that we project. And especially the more that we have, if a person has nothing and they have nothing they're proud of, so then it's very easy not to associate yourself with that. You find something else to associate yourself with. But as a person goes through their life, and you know, thank God they have nice kids, and the kids go to nice schools, and they have a nice business, and they have people that answer to them, and all these kinds of things, it becomes so easy for someone to get wrapped up in, these are why I am successful, these are why I'm here. So tell me a little bit about, again, and in all of the relationships, the relationship with myself, the relationship with my spouse, the relationship with God, that component, that identification with your stuff gets in the way, because again, your wife doesn't necessarily care. I mean, again, she wants you to have money, but like, you know, that's not what it's all about. Same with yourself, obviously same with God. So how do you come back to presence as you become more successful?
That's a huge question. And it really is such a critical factor, because we get so bogged down by stuff that we tend to forget there's a person behind that stuff. And in a sense, I really feel the coronavirus, and I hope I don't come across as wrong in saying it like this, I think the coronavirus has been a huge blessing in that respect, where kind of God just like turned off the world. And he forced us all into our homes, into the place where it's hardest to be inspiring, and where you're, you know, at your bare bones, this is who you are, and everybody knows it. And all of a sudden, it's like a reset value button and saying, so who is the real you? And I don't know what helps me. Listen, I think humility is a huge, huge, huge factor. I think it's the springboard for all forms of spiritual and inner growth and real peaceful growth. I feel that's the key. The single word answer to your question is, how much time do you spend a week working on yourself? That's the answer. And we're back to mindfulness. I mean, you could call it studying self-improvement. You could call it studying Musar. You can study Jewish mysticism. There has to be some space in your time, in your week, where you take a break from the stuff that's going on, and you, instead of being a human doing, you become a human being. How am I right here?
I'll move on from self-growth to something else now. Sorry, you know me, I like to...
I know you.
Forward. So I've been in your company when you've met famous sports stars, celebrities, not in like a mass, in a 3 or 4 person group, billionaires from all different cultures and different religions. And you've walked in, coming in as a rabbi, a teacher, and a singer. But yet you've always been able to walk into meetings with people that dramatically intimidate others. And I think of our one common friend in Toronto, who came originally from Eastern Europe. He's a global business person, and most people are immediately intimidated by him, including his good friends. And you come in easily as an equal and establish a rapport as an equal. Tell me, what is it about you that allows you to authentically interact with people that on the surface of it are enormously overachieved to the extent they intimidate even successful people? Where do you get that sense of presence and confidence?
I think it's to do with my upbringing. On the one hand, it's such a difficult thing to balance, you know, material success with being a good person. And everybody wants success because it can help. It really can. But the minute it overtakes who you are as a human being, we've missed the point. We've lost the plot. We really have. And I remember meeting, I'm an avid squash player. I play squash. I know for the North American crowd, it's probably not the most popular sport.
I'd rather use the word a ranked squash player, not an avid, a ranked squash player.
I'm a healthy average squash player. And on my flight to New York recently, was the world's #2. Okay, he's an Egyptian guy. His name is Karim Abdul Gawad, and he was on my flight. He was on my flight, actually, Mike, that I was flying to your son's wedding to sing at, right? And I walk right up to him, and I say to him, "Hey, Karim, I'm associated with my squash club in Gibraltar. We'd love to have you." He's a big friend of Israel, by the way, etc. And we just got chatting. And he said to me something on the lines of, most people do awkward things like, "Oh my gosh, I'm such a fan. Can I have your signature?" He said, "Why don't you do that?" And it's very cute. We were actually standing in the immigration line at, JFK, waiting to come in. And I said to him one line, I said, "Because I know you're a person as well." And I really think that's the answer. I really do. Doesn't matter what you've achieved. I've seen, unfortunately, so many broken hearts. I've seen so many successful veneers, shining plaques on the outside, but very, very broken people on the inside. I've unfortunately been involved with people who were suicidal. I've been involved with people who wanted to end it all. And these were people who were financially very successful. These were people who politically were highly, highly connected. We're talking about to sitting prime ministers, people in the House of Lords, etc. But the real human being, my blood is as red as yours, it rings so true. And I always think when I walk into...
How did you help those people understand what it was in their life that they were missing that caused them to ostensibly be so established and balanced and full, but yet they weren't? How do you help them understand what they're missing?
It's again, a great question. I think we're being a bit unfair to children. I think, when we read nursery rhymes to children and when we build things up to kids and when we make true idols out of sports stars, rather than talk about the discipline that this sports star's gone through, getting up at 6 a.m. and being on top of his diet and trying to achieve their best. If that guy doesn't acknowledge the doorman, he's not a good person. And I think that's really where we've got to start. It starts with kids. I teach high school children all the time. I love it because it's so vibrant and it's so wonderful. And we have a common friend, Mike, a very, very, very successful Indian businessman with hundreds of millions of dollars. And he's such a humble fellow. And I brought him into my youth club and I said, "Go ahead, ask him any question you want. And from the sublime to the ridiculous, what's it like to fly in a private jet? How many hundreds of millions have you really got?" And this guy in a second kind of broke the ice in the room and said, "Guys, if I collapsed right now with a heart attack, my money doesn't matter. Are you going to try and save my life?" I think we have to talk about legacy to children. I think we have to we're back to relationships again. How real and how meaningful are you passing on things to your children? And I think dads that stand as a European in football matches, the round sort of type of football, and scream and get involved and take it to a level which isn't healthy. I think those kinds of children grow up idolizing things that are wrong. The dad that spends more time in business meetings than he does with his children is telling his children with his body language that I value money more than you. I love this story. There was a beautiful CEO whose secretary used to manage his diary. And every single Wednesday afternoon, there was a staff meeting written into his diary, but he wrote it in with S.T.A.F.F. So, there was like a period after every one of those. And she said to him, after knowing him for like a really long time, she said to him, "Come on, who are you kidding? You don't have a staff meeting every lunchtime on Wednesday." He said, "Yeah, it's not staff. It stands for some time alone for family."
Wow, that's beautiful.
And when a kid knows that, they know that. One of the most beautiful stories of one of the legendary leaders of the Jewish people who passed away in the 1980s. He passed away in 1986, if I'm not mistaken, or 87. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, what a great leader. I mean, he rubbed shoulders with world leaders, with exclusive businessmen, but they asked his kids, how did you have such a meaningful relationship with your dad? And they said two things. And it's so subtle, but it's so powerful. And his children, who grew up themselves to be great people in their own rights, they said two things. They said, number one, whenever our dad had guests at a table for a dinner, no matter how important the people were, we sat next to dad. The guest could sit we knew my dad, he may be the greatest leader of the Jewish people today, but he's my papa, he's my dad, he's right here. Just that little that little moment of connection told the children, and it stayed with them for a lifetime. The other thing they said is that when they used to get up in the cold winter mornings in New York, and the weather was freezing, getting up out of your warm, cozy covers and making it to get dressed, it was always difficult. And this one kid said, even though my dad was awake at 4:35 every morning and he was already involved in his daily routine, but a half hour or so before I would get up, he would take my clothes that my mom had left out for me, and he would drape them over a radiator, over a heater, so my clothes would be warm for me. He said, no matter how... Sorry?
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. One thing that popped out that I've certainly seen with the clients that I work with is that people have a tendency to go to where they feel the most competent. And someone who is, successful in business finds their genius space, their artist tapestry is in the office. And so that again, for Moshe Feinstein, who was a masterful father the same way he was a masterful rabbi, but the person that feels like, I don't really know my kids so much, or I'm a great businessman, I don't know if I'm a great dad or not. How does someone like that put themselves in what might be an uncomfortable situation, taking on this role of a subpar father, subpar husband, and, brilliant businessman?
That's a stunning question. It really is. It's such a stunning question. I would encourage somebody to go to the places where they're least comfortable, because that's where they're going to grow the most. And you want to know something? Your wife, if she truly loves you, your kids that truly love you, they don't really care about the trophy that's sitting there the time you won. I have to tell you a really funny story. I was talking about playing squash, right? So once a year, Gibraltar Squash Association opens its doors, and the world's top, 150 to 50 come because there's ranking points on offer, okay? So we get involved in the tournament as well. But when you start, the world's top 20 and 30, there's no way you're going to get anywhere. So we do 2 tournaments. We get guys that knocked out in the first round, right? And then we run another tournament, okay? So I played, I think, the world's number 60, right? I was lucky to get a point off it, right? So then I went into the B tournament and I won that one, right? I was very lucky, right? And I brought home a trophy. And my kid said to me, hey, Dad, you're the best loser. Because I was the best of the losers. And you should know I cherish that comment. I would encourage people to embrace their vulnerability. Self-deprecation is such a powerful thing. I've stood in
one of the things that you've always said to me, and we've discussed a lot together, is that the people you resonate best with and the people that in your mind are truly accomplished is the person who wakes up every day, and I'm quoting, and says, I ain't that smart, I ain't that brave, and I ain't that good looking to be as privileged as I am. It's got to be for a higher power, whatever that higher power may be. Right. So talk a bit about that, because that's something that you've always consistently felt about people as a reality.
Listen, I had a troublesome growing up period, right? And like most teenagers and most kids that are rebellious, they go out and they try things in the world. And I realized that at 17 years old, I was blessed with a wonderful voice, and that girls really liked that, and I could be the life and soul of the party. And I quickly cottoned on to the fact that I could get by on my charm. But the truth is, when I went to bed at night and my head hit the pillow, it kind of wasn't such a great feeling, because I realized there's nothing that I'm really proud of. And as I've grown, and I've embraced Jewish practice. And you should know, I preach this, by the way, to people who are not even Jewish. I've recently done it with a financial institution close to me. This beautiful idea of waking up in the morning and the very first words that come out of your lips are, Modeh lefanecha, God, I'm just so grateful that I'm alive today. And if a person can be present for there, saying, you know what, I am so privileged that there's a roof over my head, that I can straighten my own back, I can breathe, there's somebody who I love who's close to me, whatever it may be. I think it's Tony Robbins who often says, 2/3 of the planet live on $2 a day or less. We really have to start there. And it doesn't really matter, like I said, the trophies on your wall. It's so humbling to sit by the bedside of somebody who's taking their last breaths, and I've done that far too many times. Or being right next to a friend of mine who was healthy one minute and is now fighting for his life the next. I mean, all of these moments, they shock us into reality. But I once heard from a very great speaker and a very, very great motivator. They told me, put those things in the freezer. Those things have got to be fresh. You've got to be able to pull that out at any moment in time. And I love that term. I really do. Because through the vicissitudes of life will take us in so many different directions. But if we can stay grounded and humble, and day in, day out, we start with that notion of, wow, I'm already privileged.
Then a bit before your time, there was a series called The A-Team. Do you remember Rabbi Rap?
Yeah.
Remember, yeah. So Mr. T, the big guy. Right?
I remember Mr. T.
So Mr. T used to have all those gold chains around his neck.
Right.
I once saw him in a talk show, and the talk show host commented, "You wearing old broken military boots, but yet your clothes are fantastic." He said, "Because when I was growing up, that's all my mom could ever afford to give me." He says, "So while with all my chains and my fancy clothes, my head's in the sky, my feet are always on the ground." And I think that kind of exemplifies the comment that you're making.
Yeah.
Let me talk to you about another thing. Let's talk about life balance. Because, knowing you so well over the years, you've been able to build a very successful singing career, a sports career, a teaching career, a rabbinical career, friendship, a great friend and a great son and a great brother to many. And yet at the same time, your kids, you've been able to learn. You never, ever give up on the time to teach your kids, to learn with your kids. And I remember when I was living in Gibraltar on a Saturday when I'd invite you for lunch or whatever, and we always enjoyed, our families enjoyed each other's company. Most times it would be, we don't accept lunch invitations because I don't want to overeat or have too much fun because I want to be focused on teaching my kids during this day. With all the pulls, and I remember even you came to my son's wedding literally for 36 hours. You flew from Gibraltar through London to New York to be back in time to have the Sabbath with your kids.
Yeah.
How do you keep, after all these years, keep so balanced? Because that's one of the challenges we all face is how do you keep that balance? Tell us what is it that helps you with that?
Well, it's again, a cracking question. And in a sense, I'm a bit of a cheat. Look, I'm a guy who preaches relationships. I'm a person who is thirsty and hungry for connection. I love it that people can reach out to me from anywhere in the world and say, just one of the words that you said in that speech, it changed my life. That is such a wonderful, brings tears to my eyes. And it just shows you what the blessing of speech, the blessing of being able to be connected is, right? And that's really, I think, what the Boston and the Harvard study shows you, meaningful connection. You can be lonely in a relationship. I mean, there's real layers of depth to that study. But I'm just frightened, Mike. I'm frightened that if I go off and be successful elsewhere and my kids say to me, "But yeah, you were never around for me," that's going to be my biggest failure. And you have to.
Fear being a motivator. Fear for the good ones.
It's a great thing. Yeah. And it's almost like failure of success. It's like you're so successful, but you're not here. And I really feel that living in Gibraltar has been the biggest blessing for me. And I don't know if I would have been able to do what I do if I would have lived in a London or a New York or a...
Yeah, I think I personally have brought you multiple offers for different cities. And you always say to me, convince my wife and convince my rabbi, and that's when I give up trying.
Listen, one of the things Gibraltar gives me is that I can be in front of a crowd, a very diverse crowd of business people or my community people, and 5 minutes later I can be on a beach, and watch a sunset with my child. And I think as parents, in a sense, I have the luxury that most people don't have or may never have, right? But I encourage parents once in a while, and this is from a school teacher, by the way, and somebody who's set up a high school, pull your kids out of school one day. Do something spontaneous. Go just write to the school and say, my kid has an appointment today, and go and spend a day with your son. Your son will never forget that. These kinds of things are so, so, so important. And I know children will grow up and I'll have to say goodbye to them and watch them. And the only thing I'll have is the strength of my relationship. And you know what? I stand here a bit as a phony because my kids think I'm too busy. I do make time for them, but I need to make more time for them. And this balance, unless it's something of a goal of yours, I think it'll get lost, and it'll get lost very, very quickly and very, very easily. I really believe that. I really do.
So maybe just rewind a little bit for us in terms of the sense of how did you get to that level? Because I think that what's beautiful about what you're saying, but also what's deeply challenging for so many people is that they sort of know what's important. Family is important, spirituality is important, charity is important, but fitness is important, you know what I'm saying? But it's so easy for people to not put those things which are the priorities in front of them. So how did you build that?
Well, I once heard a very challenging line. When somebody said, I don't have time, this guy answered back and said, there's only one kind of person on this planet that doesn't have time, and they're lying in a cemetery. All the rest of us have time. It's just what you're going to do with it. And it's so true. It's so true. I remember going to Canada to speak to a sales team of a company. And I noticed when I walked in that they were all very unhealthy. They were overweight. A lot of them smoked. I saw the snacks that they were eating was terrible. And so I talked about fitness. I said, if you drink water and you're slightly healthy and you moderately work out 3 times a week and you bring your calorie level down, you'll feel better. You'll have more energy. You'll be able to do better. And one of them stuck their hand up. And I apologized for that person because they walked right into my elephant trap and said, sir, I don't have time to do that. And he was a very, very heavy set fellow. I said, sir, you don't have time not to do that. Because when they're cutting your heart open before you're 60 and giving you a triple heart bypass, you will darn well say, I wish I would have listened to him. And the funny thing is that chance is there for you today. You can do something about that now.
Yeah.
The real answer to your question, Rabbi Rupp, is I got there because I was useless at it. I was terrible at it. My wife said to me, you're not here. And when you're here, you're not here. Your mind is somewhere else. Your kids need you. And I just felt guilty. I felt I can't be a motivator if I can't do a little something myself. And it guilted me into doing something about it. And I don't get it right tons of times, but I'm frightened for getting it wrong. I'm really frightened of getting it wrong. And I believe people have to live with a mission statement. I really feel that we don't see the wood for the trees. Life just trundles on so quickly. And people find themselves 10 years into something, batting on mediocrity and saying, well, this is okay. And in some levels that may be true, but unless we're pushing ourselves to grow.
I love what you said. I'm going to interrupt you.
Please do.
You said people have to live with the mission statement.
Yeah.
All day long, I hear people, because of different groups and forums I'm in, same with Rabbi Rupp, people say, I prepared a mission statement. I have a mission statement. What you say is you have to live with it.
Right.
It's one thing to spend all the time writing it up and developing it. If you don't execute on it.
Right. Right. I would say probably one of the best things human beings can do today is to try and allocate maybe 10 minutes a day. But those 10 minutes have to be in isolation. It needs to be you and you alone, not with anything in front of you, maybe a notebook, maybe. And just sit and clear your head. And just in those 10 minutes, just listen to the traffic that's going on. Listen to your fears. Something will pop into your head. Something will come clear to you. In those minutes, there's no BSing who you are. Because this is what I talked about, relationship with self. If you don't spend time, some people will call it meditation, but you know what? I tried to convince a friend of Mike's, and I'll be very candid over here, but somebody who was certainly arrogant and life was running away with them. And, if they earned 1.2 million, they were spending 1.5. And it was just, it was a pain. It was crazy. And I was brought on to try and get a better balance, get a better awareness, build a rapport. And we built a rapport very, very quickly. We understood each other. I didn't
drive his Ferrari a few times.
I did. I drove his Ferrari a couple of times.
Ferrari to drive, yeah.
I want to tell you something. The best story about me driving that Ferrari, he never let anyone drive it. I don't know why he let me drive it. But we were driving it together from a beautiful place in Spain all the way to Gibraltar. And we drove along this beautiful road and we came to the end of the road and this van pulled up with all these workers in it. And there was this beautiful Ferrari 599, F430 it was, I think. And these guys taking out their phones and taking pictures. And I turned to my friend whose car it was. I said, look, they think you're the hanger-on because you're in my car. I would treat him like, I'm not giving you respect because you've got some shekels in your bank account, But I actually flew to Zurich to try and spend some time with him and try and get him to understand that this mindfulness, be alone with yourself. Because
I have a cool story to actually tell you. A friend who Rabbi Rupp knows very well just bought a new house in San Diego. I think we went to see it yesterday. The house was built in the early 70s, right on the water in Point Loma, right on the water. beautiful house and all that type of stuff. But there's this tower. And I said to him, what's that tower? It's got the stairs, circular stairs to a room that had to been 8 foot by 8 foot.
Lovely.
The owner built that, and with windows onto the water. The owner built that as the solitary tower.
Beautiful.
He was the only guy that was allowed up there in the 70s. And he would only go up there every night, have a cigar, what it was. And that was it wasn't this huge room. It had a nice, comfortable chair, but it was his mindfulness tower. How cool is that, eh?
That is awesome. That is just the nail on the head. I flew to try and make a dent in this man's crazy life. And I want to tell you something. I failed miserably. I said, spend time alone, get in touch with yourself. He says, I do. I walk on a golf course and I listen to podcasts. I said, no, don't do. Just be. And you want to know something? After trying and trying and trying and not getting it, I gave up. I moved on to some other things, but I genuinely failed. They gave me a chance to try. And I think people will either get it or not get it. But people who aspire to get this, where there's a will, there's a way. You'll make it happen. And and I think recognizing mistakes is such a beautiful thing. You have to recognize, I didn't get it quite right this week. I was too involved this week. I was too distant this week. I didn't sleep enough this week. I didn't eat well this week. All those kinds of things. You'll get that in your moment. You can spend alone.
Rabbi, I think we only have a few minutes left, and I've done most of the talking with Rabbi Noiky. Do you want to take over the remaining questions or discussion?
I think, well, it's a great point. I think there's a lot more to discuss. But I think it's kind of a final meditation, potentially. Share with us how a person best goes about. You mentioned finding the whole idea of a mission statement. It's a big problem for a lot of people. I had an experience with a client where I said, what do you want? And he didn't know. And that's a big problem. He's built a huge company and has no problem buying anything he wants, but the big questions. So how does one develop that perspective?
I really think that people's mission statements should evolve. And I really think we all have to be humble enough to know that we're all learning every step of the way. Every day is another journey. Some days I'll get things right, like I said, and some days I'll get things wrong. I always tell people, and I certainly tell this to clients, and I'm talking about like clinical clients now, who have employed me as their clinical therapist, even though I do less and less of that now, and I do much more coaching and life coaching and talking and speeches to groups, etc. But I really feel that you have to associate yourself and you have to get in touch with a nucleus of people who are genuinely invested in your growth, and the brothers. And these people you can probably count on one hand. I've got hundreds of friends. I've got, and when I go to my moments, and I have my low moments, what I have to do is know a number of things. Number one, when I'm in a confused state, that's fine. That is okay. As a natural, normal human being, I will have highs, epic highs, thank God. But I'll also have lows. That's normal to have. Don't panic in those times. And when you're in that vulnerable place, just ride it out. Don't make major decisions. Don't get down on yourself. Ride it out. You'll come back. As sure as the tide goes out, the tide will come back in again. It will soon be roaring. And in those times, I think it's critical for you to hold on to those people who give you strength. I really think it's so important. And you want to know it? Those people will help shape your mission statement. If you've got a really good friend, he knows if you're valuing yourself by your bank balance, that you're making a rich mistake. And I don't excuse the pun for a second.
Yeah, and choose those people that when they give you tough feedback, it's not because of their pride of authorship, it's not because of their agenda, it's because they're 100% there for you, your own, for you yourself, their agenda, and everything they're giving you is authentic, right?
Mike has seen me perform, and thank God I've got a wonderful voice. God has blessed me, let's put it that way, with a wonderful voice. And people come up to me and say, oh my gosh, you're amazing. And I would sit down in front of Mike, and Mike would say, you can't ride through life on that. You know that.
We've had real conversations.
We've had great conversations. That's why I love him like a brother. And that's why meaningful connection, that's a proper relationship. And by the way, that's what I talked about at the beginning of the show. Those are the kinds of people that live the longest. Those are the people that live healthiest. Their relationships matter. And it's an evolving process. People who say, I don't know what my mission statement is, or I want to be happy, they need to be probed. Those people need to be pushed and said, no, go and write something more meaningful. I'm not having a generic soundbite. It has to really be you. And it's an evolving process. It can take months to write a good mission statement. Then the clinical challenge is, of course, how often do you read it?
Then the challenge is to get your wife and your adult children to sign off on it. That's the whole thing, right?
I think they have to write it with you. I really believe families need mission statements. I think it was Steve Covey that said it. I think you guys would say Covey, right? He talks about making a mission statement with families. It's the most amazing thing.
And that's one thing our friend Josh is very, very good at. He's very intentional. They have a family mission statement, a family plan. It's listen. Yeah. It's a core of the Jewish society, right? So I didn't have any closing questions. How about you, Rabbi?
No, this is great. Noiky, how do people find out more about you? If they ever come through Gibraltar or want to have you come sing or speak, or how do we find you?
ravnoik.com. RAVNOIK at gmail.com. Sorry. I'm the worst at promoting myself. I have an unbelievable blessing of word of mouth and a few YouTube clips and a Noiky Roberts handle at Instagram, which is managed frankly by someone else, because I'm useless at these things, just to promote me as a singer. And I'm just truly blessed. I really am.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. It's such a pleasure.
There you have it, folks, another inspiring episode. If you enjoyed this, I ask you to please share this with your friends and to like us over on Rabbi Rupp through Facebook or on YouTube. And the more that we're able to get these important messages out, the more that we can really make an impact in the world. So I encourage you, please, to stay tuned. We have a ton of amazing speakers coming up, and also to tell your friends about it. Thank you very much.